everyone, welcome to another deep dive. You ready to unlock some serious English vocabulary skills?
Always.
Today we're diving into an awesome episode called Mastering English Vocabulary. Tips and Tricks for Success. It's from the Language Learners Lounge podcast. They had some really practical advice that I thought we could unpack.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
So they kick things off by talking about why vocabulary matters. And, they make a good point. It's not about memorizing a whole dictionary. It's about building like a toolbox for communication.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Right. The more tools you have, the more you can express and understand.
Absolutely.
And I think it's helpful to even think about like your own goals, right? Like maybe you want to give a killer presentation in English or finally get those British jokes. A strong vocabulary is like essential.
Totally. And they really emphasize that just memorizing lists isn't effective. It's about learning in context.
Okay, so they say context is king, but like how do you actually do that?
Well, they talk about focusing on collocations, which are words that naturally go together. Like, instead of just learning the word strong, you learn phrases like strong coffee or strong opinion.
Okay.
It helps you understand how words are actually used.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like learning the word's natural habitat, not just its dictionary definition.
Exactly. And when you come across those collocations in real life, the meaning just clicks so much faster.
This reminds me of when I was learning phrasal verbs. It felt impossible until I started noticing them in movies and TV shows. Suddenly, pick up or look after made so much more sense.
Yeah, perfect example. The episode also suggests paying attention to how words are used in different situations. Like a cool breeze and a cool person are both cool, but the context tells you the meaning.
Right, so it's not just about learning individual words, but understanding their shades of meaning.
Exactly, and this is where reading, watching, listening to English content becomes so powerful. It's like passive vocabulary training.
Speaking of training, they bring up a familiar tool, but with a modern twist. Flashcards.
Yes, they suggest using apps like Anki or Quizlet, which have spaced repetition built in.
Oh, okay, spaced repetition sounds cool, but honestly, doesn't that get kind of tedious? How do you make it fun and engaging?
Well, it's all about personalization. They encourage adding images, creating your own example sentences, or even recording yourself saying the words. So instead of a generic cat card, you could have a picture of your cat and a recording of yourself saying, "My cat is sleeping."
That's a great idea. That makes it way more personal and memorable. It's like building your own little vocabulary world.
Exactly. And this leads to another key point. Personalize your learning. Choose words that are relevant to your life, your hobbies, your goals.
Oh, so if you're a foodie, you might learn words like sizzle or aromatic instead of something more abstract.
Exactly. It's about making it meaningful. They gave a great example. I need a recipe for a spicy chicken curry. If cooking is your thing, that sentence is suddenly full of useful vocabulary.
It's like learning by doing, but with words. And speaking of expanding your vocabulary, kind of organically, they talk about word families and synonyms.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Instead of just learning happy, you learn happily. Happiness, unhappy, the whole family.
Whoa. It's like a vocabulary tree with branches growing in all directions. And then adding synonyms to the mix takes it to another level. So instead of just happy, you've got joyful, cheerful, content.
Right. That's where the nuance and flexibility come in. The episode emphasizes that synonyms allow you to express yourself more precisely and avoid sounding repetitive.
So it's like having a whole palette of words to paint with instead of just one color.
Exactly. And when you combine this with the context is king idea, you start to see how vocabulary truly unlocks fluency.
It's about understanding those subtle differences between happy, joyful, and content, and knowing which one fits the situation best.
Exactly. And they make another great point. Use it or lose it.
Ugh. I feel that one deep down. I've learned so many fancy words, only to forget them because I never actually use them. So what do they suggest for that?
Well, they say to try to incorporate new words into your daily life. Maybe write it in a journal. Set daily goals to use new words. Or even just think to yourself in English. It's about keeping those words active.
I love the idea of setting daily goals. Even if it's just slipping one new word into a conversation, it's progress, right?
Absolutely. Every little bit helps solidify those words in your memory.
Okay, so they also go on to suggest some really useful tools for vocabulary building. Let's dive into those.
They start with the basics, online dictionaries and thesauruses for quick definitions, pronunciation checks, even example sentences.
Yeah, those are like essential, even for native speakers like me. I can't imagine navigating English without a good online dictionary. What else?
They also mention language learning apps like Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel. Those are great for interactive practice, and they can make learning feel a lot less like a chore.
Oh yeah, I've heard good things about those apps. It's cool how technology can make language learning so much more accessible and engaging. It's a far cry from like the dry textbooks I used to use.
And of course, they recommend immersing yourself in English content through podcasts, audiobooks, movies, TV shows. It's like absorbing vocabulary by osmosis.
It's true. I find myself picking up new phrases and expressions all the time just from watching my favorite shows. It's a fun way to learn without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and making English part of your daily life. But they also warn against some common pitfalls, which I think are worth mentioning.
Oh, definitely. What are those? What should we be watching out for?
Well, the first one is falling into the trap of rote memorization without actual practice. It's like trying to learn to swim by just reading a book about it. You have to get in the water and actually do it.
Right. It's tempting to think that just memorizing definitions is enough, but it's like having a toolbox full of tools you never use. What good are they if you don't know how to use them?
Exactly. And another mistake is neglecting pronunciation. It's easy to get caught up in the spelling and meaning of a word and forget that how you say it is just as important.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I once spent ages learning this really fancy word, only to find out I was pronouncing it completely wrong. Super embarrassing. Do they have any tips on how to avoid that?
They recommend using online dictionaries and language learning apps, many of which have audio pronunciations. So you can listen and repeat until you get it right.
That's a good tip. It's like having a personal pronunciation coach in your pocket. And I imagine practicing pronunciation can also help with listening comprehension, right? If you can say it correctly, you're more likely to recognize it when you hear it.
Absolutely. And the final pitfall they mention is trying to learn too much too fast. It's like stuffing yourself at a buffet. You might feel full at first, but you won't retain much in the long run.
It's the classic quality over quantity approach. I'm much better at remembering a few words I've truly mastered than a whole list of words I vaguely recognize. It's like building a solid foundation brick by brick.
Exactly. It's about focusing on understanding and using the words you learn rather than just accumulating a large vocabulary.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from the importance of context to the power of personalized learning and the pitfalls to avoid. What would you say is the most valuable takeaway for our listener who's trying to master English vocabulary?
For me, it's that building a strong vocabulary isn't about just like brute force memorization. It's about making it a natural part of your journey with English.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's about finding what works for you and making it part of your everyday life.
Yeah, and the episode's host made a really good point that, it takes time and effort, but it's so worth it. Imagine being able to express yourself confidently and understand those little nuances that make English so rich.
It really does open up a whole new world of communication and understanding. And to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question inspired by the episode. Okay, so if you could magically master 5 new English words this week, which ones would you choose? And how would you use them? Think about words that would be personally meaningful to you, words that could help you achieve your language goals, or even just words that you'd enjoy using. Well, that's a great question. It really makes you think about what's important to you in your language learning.
Exactly. So if you're listening, we'd love to hear your word wish list or any other thoughts you have from this deep dive. Feel free to share your insights, and let's keep this vocabulary conversation going. Happy learning, everyone.